Back in session.
All right, you may be seated. Your Honor, we've released all witnesses.
Are you calling Bedard back?
Yeah.
Then not yet.
All right. Okay. All right. Everyone should have a copy of the jury instructions for every lawyer and the defendant as well. The only thing that is going to be different that I'm going to give the jury is on weighing the evidence. After issue number 5, your copy has give if applicable. That's not supposed to be in there. So for the jury, I took that out. I decided not to kill a whole lot of trees for you guys because that's not really necessary. But I can tell you that the jurors are not going to have the version that says give if applicable. Okay? All right. All right. Are we ready for the jurors?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very good. Let's bring them in.
I told the bailiffs I have a model block here that's to be used as a demonstrative
For your closing?
for Mr. Bedard's testimony.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Obviously, no pointing at the jury. Everybody knows that. All right. Very good.
Your Honor, the jury is present and seated.
Very good. What says the defense?
Your Honor, the defense has reached an agreement with the state with regard to the omission of 2 items of evidence that we would like to publish to the jury.
All right. So you want to move to have them admitted?
Yes, defense exhibits 2 and 3, I believe, would be the appropriate.
Any objection from the state?
No, Your Honor.
All right. They are admitted, and then you may publish them.
I'm going to open the evidence now, Your Honor.
You may.
One item is the shirt that the defendant was wearing at the time. The other is the sunglasses that the defendant was wearing at the time.
As I said before, members of the jury, any and all evidence introduced in the case, you will be able to take back with you in the jury room when you deliberate. So this won't be a last opportunity to view the evidence. Very good. What says the defense?
Defense rests, Your Honor.
Very good. Any rebuttal witnesses for the state?
Yes, Your Honor. The state would briefly recall Roy Bedard. Bedard? Bedard's testimony, we're going to be using a model. This is not a real firearm.
Let's put him under oath again since it's a whole different day.
Do you swear or affirm the evidence you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
And sir, this way. Good. Have a seat. State your microphone and last name, voice.
All right, welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosenwasser, you may begin.
Yeah, just for record purposes, can you please again state your first and last name?
Yes, Roy Bedard.
Okay. Now, do you make model or cast iron firearms?
Yes.
Okay. And this blue model I'm holding, did you make this and bring this to court?
Yes, my court is from my company.
Okay. And would it aid you in the testimony you're about to give?
Yes.
All right. May I approach the witness?
You may.
If you wouldn't mind, could you please step down in front of the jury and let's discuss the mechanics of firing a firearm. And for aiming purposes, we'll aim at the TV. Would you be able to do that?
Sure. Your Honor, can we establish a foundation that this replica is the type of firearm that was allegedly used in this case?
We can.
my position would be whether it is or isn't, this doesn't have to do with the particular firearm, it's just the mechanics of how you
Can
pull
we
the
approach,
trigger.
Your Honor?
Okay.
Instead of using the model that you brought, would you be comfortable using the actual firearm that was used in this case?
Yes.
Okay. May I have the witness step down?
You may.
Obviously, it's been rendered safe,
Okay.
but again, we'll use the TV instead. Could you explain to the members of the jury the mechanics of firing a firearm?
Yes. So when you fire a firearm, there's really three fundamental components. One of them, I'll tell you and then I'll show you, is what we call sight
Keep your
picture.
voice up, sir, please.
I'm sorry? It's what we call sight picture is the first fundamental. Secondly, there's sight alignment. And third, you heard from Mr. Brown, trigger control. Those three things, no matter how advanced the firing gets, remain fundamental, whether you're a basic officer at the academy or you're doing something more tactical like a SWAT team. You would retain those three fundamentals to make sure that you are able to get your rounds on target.
Let me stop you there for a second. Let's talk about civilians, okay? The three fundamentals that you're talking about, they also apply to civilians, is that
Yes,
correct?
anyone who shoots a firearm.
Okay, so we'll talk just generally, not specifically law enforcement. It's gonna be the same between law enforcement and a civilian, correct?
Correct.
All right, so let's talk about the three different parts.
Okay, so just to familiarize you with the mechanics of the weapon, this is not actually staged to be ready to fire. Of course, it's a little convoluted with the strap there. But it has a front sight. Usually the front sight sits here. It's been pulled back because the slide has been locked back. This ejects bullets when you shoot it. So every time you shoot it, this slide comes back automatically and the casing falls out and it rechambers so that this part of the weapon would be here. So I just want you to know that. This is where the front sight would be. This is the rear sight. So sight picture, the first part, the first fundamental, means that when you place the weapon up against, visually, the target, you want to be able to see this front sight. And you'll notice that this has a tritium white dot. That's to attract your eye. That's to draw your eye to it so that you're able to see it both in darkness and in light. This rear sight also is painted white because the second part of this is once you place the weapon visually against your target, your eye needs to take the front sight and place it evenly between the rear sight. If, for example, it looks like this, the weapon is not going to fire straight. If it looks like this, it's not going to fire straight. But if it looks like that, it will fire straight. You also have to worry about if it looks like that, right, it's going to go high, and if it looks like that, it's going to go low. So sight alignment means that you're perfectly aligning the front sight with the window of the rear sight. That's the second part. The third part that you heard about is trigger control. And what trigger control is based on the idea that your index finger, which is the finger you fire with, articulates in three places from the hand. You have three joints here. The weakest part, arguably, is the pad of the finger. The strongest part is near the hand. You would know that if you ever practice grip strength techniques. It's this part of the hand where your power is. But that's not the part of the hand you should shoot with. And so a lot of times people who have smaller hands, weaker fingers, will try to compensate for the way it's supposed to be done by pushing more of their finger in to get a greater amount of power to pull the trigger. This was really common when we were using revolvers that were double action, took more power than, for instance, semi-automatics. The proper trigger control brings the pad of the finger straight back. And it does that so that you don't pull the weapon, right? So if I have this weapon coming straight back after setting up my sight picture and my sight alignment, I should be able to stay on target when I pull the trigger. If I push too much of my finger in, what happens is it pushes the weapon, and that's what they call, or I think you heard the term slapping the trigger. Slapping the trigger.
Let me stop you just for 1
Yep.
second. You have both hands together.
Yes.
Okay, is there a term for that?
We typically call that marrying the hands, and the reason for that is to provide stability for the weapon, of course, because when the weapon fires, it's an explosion, and you want to keep control of it. So marrying the weapon tends to be one hand grabbing the grip, you can see this empty space here. The strong hand of my support, or I'm sorry, the strong part of my support hand fills that space and wraps around. So this is the marrying position of the hand.
Is that when you're the most stable with the firearm, so to speak?
This is when you're most stable with the firearm. This is where the firearm is essentially in the grip that it will be in when you fire.
Okay. Now, and I apologize for cutting you off. When we were talking about the video, when we talked about the two hand movements, was the defendant's hands already married? Was he already having a firm support?
Yes. So with the weapon married, or the hands married and supporting the weapon, and you seeing your front sight and aligning your rear sight with the front sight, now it's time to pull the trigger. What we would expect is if the weapon trigger is slapped, obviously the round is going to be errant. It's going to go with the right-hander left, with a left-hander, it's going to go right. So it will happen at exactly the time, simultaneously, to when the trigger is pulled. You wouldn't expect to see this and then the trigger being pulled. That would not be a slapping of the trigger. That would be something else. I don't know what that is, but that would be something else. To say that this is a slapping of the trigger would require the shot left the gun at the same time that you saw the jerk.
Okay. So movements independent of the trigger would not be considered a trigger pull.
No.
Okay. And movements independent would not be consistent with a trigger slap.
No.
Then a moment, Your Honor. You can return to the record. Actually, I'll take the evidence from you. Thank you, sir. I have no further questions. Thank you, sir.
Any cross-examination?
Just briefly. Mr. Bedard, Dr. Bedard, actually, currently, you're very familiar with the use of firearms, correct?
Yes.
And you shot guns before, correct?
Yes.
In fact, in 1995, you shot a woman, didn't you, as a police officer?
I actually shot.
All right, approach a minute.
That is.
No further questions, Dr. Bedard?
Was that objection sustained, Your Honor?
It was.
Thank you.
All right, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, sir. You may
Thank
step
you.
down.
And he can be excused.
Any further rebuttal witnesses for the state?
No, Your Honor.
If we could conference just briefly as to whether we want Sir rebuttal. I doubt it, but I just want to make sure.
No problem.
Witnesses and Sir rebuttal.
Okay, very good. All right,